Hello, English friends. Let's go over the study guide. So have your study guide in front of you, and we will do that. All right, so at the very top of your study guide, it tells you what vocab to study on Quizlet, which you guys have been doing anyway. You've been going to that one that's marked end of year in the Quizlet sets. So that's what you should keep doing. So make sure you're good with those words because so much of the final is going to be vocabulary. Okay, we've done this before, so let's go over it and hopefully it'll seem really familiar. So first of all, when you are choosing whether to use I or me in a sentence, you simply take out the other person for a second, finish it without them there, and then pop them back in. So if you took out the other person in the first sentence, which would be she, so you obviously don't need the and, so you would say, I got into a huge argument over the usefulness of brie cheese. So you would pop her back in, she and I. Come to the festival with Paige and take out Paige, come to the festival with me. So with Paige and me. You and I don't know how to operate a hot air balloon, which is a shame since the pilot just fell overboard. I wish someone would give you and me a jackknife, give me a jackknife. And then for this one, between you and, it is always between you and me. Between you and me, Disney is lame. Don't hate me. Crosby asked May and me, Crosby asked me to kindly sit down and shut up. So May and me. Starting to rain, so you and I will just have to relax in the hammock later. And the subtleties of the play were lost on Allegra and me. All right, next section. What does I couldn't care less mean? That means you do not care at all. So I always teach this because people say it wrong most of the time. You mostly hear people say, I could care less, which is the opposite of what they're trying to get across. If they're trying to let you know they don't care at all, then you need to say, I couldn't care less, because if you care not at all, you can't get under that to care less than that. So you're already at ground zero. So I couldn't care less. You don't care at all. She puts on mascara. So this is the then thing. Remember, you use then, en, when you're talking about time moving forward. So something happens, something else happens. So she puts on mascara. That's what she does first. And then dries her hair. You can remember it because E in then matches the E on the end of time. It's kind of weird, but maybe it'll help you. And than is used for comparisons, and the A in than matches the A in comparisons. We'll go to college, and so this is time happening. They're going to do something, and something's going to follow that. We'll go to college and then into business. Here's a comparison. I like Pepsi more than Coke, AN. I finished my book, time is passing. Then I bought another one. And the last one is a comparison. You have more guts than I do. We're comparing our guts levels, and you have more guts. So that's a comparison. So it's than. All right, run-on sentences. A run-on sentence is when you have two or more sentences together with no punctuation in between them. One just leads right into the other with zero punctuation to break them apart. So where is our breaking point between our two sentences? In the first one, the pawnbroker's face is gone. He can't stop staring at the bracelet. It's between gone and he. Jack worked on the faulty generator. He watched a movie after work. Generator, period, he, new sentence. He hauled off and punched Sam in the eye. It wasn't hard enough to do any real damage. I, period, it wasn't hard enough is your new sentence. All right, now looking at fragments. At the beginning of first period, but then it quiets down. Well, that is not a complete thought. We are missing something. So you would have to add to that to make it make sense. So you could say something like, it's noisy, that's the obvious one. It's chaotic at the beginning of first period, but then it quiets down. Next, first sent me to military school. Who first sent you to military school? That doesn't make for a complete thought. My parents first sent me to military school. He only had to worry about completing 8th grade. That's a complete sentence that has the subject and the predicate and everything's fine. Next, too much of his younger brother. Well, what about it? Too much of his younger brother. Too much of his younger brother drove him to an early grave. Or he had had too much of his younger brother. And the last one, the closest thing to a greeting in the claustrophobic darkness. Again, not a complete thought. So what could you do with that sentence? The closest thing to a greeting in the claustrophobic darkness was a creepy whisper. I don't know where that came from. All right, now comma splices. Same exact idea as a run-on sentence, but in a run-on sentence, there's no punctuation between the two sentences, or 3 or 4 sentences, whatever. Whereas in a comma splice, 2 complete sentences with a comma in between, and a comma is not strong enough to go between sentences. If there's one thing I want you to leave my class with and take with you into life, it is don't write comma splices. Understand that you can't put a comma between sentences. It's such a common thing that you see people do wrong, and it's a really bad grammar or punctuation mistake. Okay, so let's look at the first one. Connor now understands why the Admiral was telling you these things. It was more than a confession. So you can see where the comma is there, and we have a complete sentence on the left of it and a complete sentence on the right. So the 3 ways to fix it, well, the one way that's 100% gonna fix it every time, no having to think about it, is just make the comma a period and start a new sentence. So things, period, capital I for it, and now you have fixed it. You can also leave the comma there, but add a conjunction. And the conjunctions are for and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Fanboys, for and, nor, yet, or, but, so. So what can we put there? Connor now understands why the Admiral was telling him these things. For it was more than just a confession. Yeah, that one would work. Or you can put a semicolon there if the first sentence leads to the second sentence. And in this case, it would. So the first thing about the Admiral telling him things, you could easily put a semicolon there. But if you don't want to have to think too much about it, put a period. Next, Blaine grits his teeth and curses. He thinks for a moment, then he starts shaking his head. So obviously the period would work after curses. Could you add a fanboy? Blaine grits his teeth and curses, and he thinks for a moment, then starts shaking his head. And that's a weak one. For and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Well, I don't think one works there. But you could put a semicolon there because the first half leads right into what's going on in the second sentence. All right, which is correct? I should have known or I should have known? Well, it's have, even though it sounds like of, but it's have. Have is a helping verb. It is helping the main verb, known. And should is also helping verb. So should have, it's never should of or could of. It's always have. Next, it is, I used to swim a lot or a lot. Well, the red line there tells you that a lot as one word is wrong. So a lot is 2 words. All of the sudden or all of a sudden the sun came out. All of a sudden. My goal is for everyone to get that right on a test. I always put it on the finals, and there are always people who still get it wrong. All of a sudden, all of a sudden. Which is correct. If I was younger, I would go in a second. If I were younger, I would go in a second. Well, that is the subjunctive tense. And when you use if or I wish, you use were instead of was. Like if I were a rich man, if I were younger. And then it's always between you and me, never between you and I. Next part, when you have a date with an S on the end, like you're talking about a period of time, you do not use the apostrophe. So the first one there is correct. And $ go before the number. To make a word plural, you just add an S or an ES, and depending on what the word is, right? Why did that all of a sudden seem confusing in my head? But you do not ever add an apostrophe S to make a word plural. Apostrophes are for showing possession or they're taking the place of a missing letter, like in the word shouldn't. You have an apostrophe between the N and the T, shouldn't, and it's a placeholder for the letter O. So apostrophes are not ever used to make a word plural. So these are just going to be Klondike bar, B-A-R-S, subway, Y-S, elevator, R-S, interpretation, N-S. All right, MLA format, what goes next to the page number? And the page number is at the top right of your paper, if you remember. And that is your last name, the writer's last name. Point of that is if you have a bunch of pages and somehow they come apart, the person who is in charge of those papers, even if it's you, well, I guess it wouldn't matter if it's you, but the person who has a bunch of those things needs to be able to match things back up right. So that's why the name goes there. It's just a safety precaution. So next to the page number, your last name. Titles are centered, and that is the only part of an MLA paper that is centered. So once you center your title, you need to go back into left justified. Margins are 1 inch all around. That means how much white space is showing at the top, sides, and bottom. What size font do you use? 12 in MLA format. 12, 12, 12, 12, 12. And you double space your entire paper from beginning to end. And you never double space. You don't ever finish a paragraph and then go hit return twice to start your next paragraph. You don't do that before your title, after your 4 things at the top, which I'm about to talk about. It is evenly double spaced, completely uniform throughout your whole paper. Every single thing is double spaced. Do you indent your paragraphs? Yes, please. Indenting paragraphs, if you try to read something, if you're reading a book and the paragraphs aren't indented, it is much harder to follow it and to stay organized, feel like you're organized and you're understanding what's going on. You must indent your paragraphs. All right, the 4 things that go at the top left in an MLA paper are your name, and I request it to be last name, comma, first name. Whoever your teacher is or professor is, they'll tell you what their need is in that situation there for all of it, but it's going to be this order: your name, then my name, Karen O'Connor, and then the period number, and then the date. And it's the date that the paper or whatever the project is due. So your name, last first, my name, period number, date. All right, if you are in first period, you can stop watching this now because you guys are not doing propaganda this year. That's coming later for you. But if you are in second, third, fourth, or fifth, stay with me while I run through this propaganda stuff. All right, the sole purpose of propaganda: to sell something, selling a product, selling an idea, selling a candidate. It's to sell something in some way, to convince people of something. Techniques used in advertising. We've been doing a bunch of these lately, so I'm going to zip through them. Transfer. Words and ideas with positive connotation. A connotation is a suggestion or a feeling, used to suggest that the positive qualities would be associated with the product and the user. Here's an example. Textiles are fabrics, clothing. A textile manufacturer wanting people to wear their product to stay cool during the summer, that's what their goal is. Obviously their goal is to sell you their product, and their ad shows people wearing fashions made from their cloth at a sunny seaside setting where there is a cool breeze. So you'll see that, and it'll be like this feeling of, oh, look at the beach, and it's so nice and beautiful and cool out, and you're going to transfer that feeling onto the product. Plain folks is when you just use ordinary people in your ad. So a cereal manufacturer shows an ordinary family sitting down to breakfast enjoying their product. Snob appeal. Snob appeal is used if you want to make your target audience feel like they're rich and powerful and maybe better than, if people want to feel like they're better than other people, snob appeal works on them. The use of the product makes the customer part of an elite group with a luxurious and glamorous lifestyle. So a coffee manufacturer shows people dressed in formal gowns and tuxedos drinking their brand at an art gallery. So you see how that's kind of an upper crust situation. So you drink their coffee and it makes you feel like you're all that. Testimonial is when you have a famous person endorsing your product. So Michael Jordan recommends a particular brand of skates. Skates? Skates? Okay. That would work. Name calling, using derogatory or negative words to create an association in the reader's mind between the person or object and something that is bad, feared, or distasteful. Because in propaganda, you can also use fear or it's, negative things to sway someone away from something or to scare them into buying something like a home security system. Card stacking is when you don't give all of the information. It happens all the time. So it means stacking the cards in favor of the product. Advertisers stress the positive qualities and completely ignore the negative ones. So say you have a brand of snack food that is full of sugar and calories, and the commercial boasts that the product is low in fat. And people love to hear that, right? We hear low fat, we think healthy, but they're not telling you about the rest of the ingredients and the impact that it's going to have on your health. That is card stacking. Glittering generalities, that is the one where you use these appealing words or images to sell the product. The message this commercial gives indirectly is that if you buy the item, you will be using a wonderful product and it will change your life. This cosmetic will make you look younger. This car will give you status. This magazine will make you a leader. All these commercials are using glittering generalities to enhance product appeal. So it's when you see words kind of standing alone, like, oh my gosh, what's that Starbucks ad? The best coffee for the best you. So best is a glittering generality, right? It's just words that make something sound good. And last bandwagon is when everybody's doing it, why aren't you? So you don't want to be left out. People don't like that feeling. So next we go into rhetoric, and rhetoric are the three types of arguments that you can use to convince somebody of something. So you see all this propaganda stuff kind of interweaves. So ethos, logos, and pathos, or ethos, logos, pathos, you can pronounce it either way. Ethos. If you're reading, if somebody's trying to make a person or a company sound really ethical and like they're really, you can trust them, that is ethos. The person speaking is credible and should be believed. They are ethical. Logos is an appeal to logic, and that's the one where you'll see facts and statistics and numbers and history, historical proof, of something happening over and over and being successful. And may have people who are authorities in the field. And then you have pathos, which is an appeal to emotion. So that's when you're making somebody feel either scared or, oh, that's so sweet, or that, all those kinds of things. An appeal to emotion. And we've just redone some work with those, with rhetoric. So hopefully you'll remember what that's all about. And the last section, logical fallacies. Common errors in reasoning that will undermine the logic of your argument. Fallacies can either be illegitimate arguments or irrelevant points and are often identified because they lack evidence that supports their claim. Avoid these common fallacies in your own arguments and watch for them in arguments of others. So this is about making you aware of faulty arguments so you know how to address them. Or you can say, what's this person doing? I don't trust them now. All right, most common ones, slippery slope. So that's the one where if A happens, then B is going to happen, then C, D, E, F, G, and then it takes you on this crazy ride all the way down to this horrible thing that really they're not connected at all. And all those things would have to be exact. Example, if we ban Hummers because they are bad for the environment, eventually the government will ban all cars so we should not ban Hummers. What? That does not make sense. But people say things like that all the time. So, okay, let's look at the rest of it. In this example, the author is equating banning Hummers with banning all cars, which is not the same thing. Hasty generalization. This is the one where you draw a conclusion based on only a little bit of evidence. In other words, you are rushing to a conclusion before you have all the relevant facts. Even though it's only the first day, I can tell this is going to be a boring course. Maybe it will be a boring course, but you really don't know yet. You don't have enough information or evidence. So, okay, I'm going to read this. In this example, the author is basing his evaluation on the entire course on only the first day, which is notoriously boring and full of housekeeping tasks for most courses. To make a fair and reasonable evaluation, the author must attend not one, but several classes, and possibly even examine the textbook, talk to the professor, or talk to others who have previously finished the course in order to have sufficient evidence on which to base a conclusion. So a hasty generalization is jumping to a conclusion before you have enough information to make a sound conclusion. Ad hominem is when you attack the man. It literally translates to against the man. That's in the Latin of it. This is an attack on the character of a person rather than the opinions or the argument that that person is making. So Greenpeace's strategies aren't effective because they're all dirty, lazy hippies. Well, we haven't heard anything factual about Greenpeace. We've just heard this thing that they're all dirty, lazy hippies. Well, that doesn't sound good, but it's not a good argument. In this example, the author doesn't name particular strategies Greenpeace has suggested, much less evaluate those strategies on their merits. Instead, the author attacks the characters of the individuals in the group, attacking the man, not the argument. Red herring is a diversionary tactic that avoids the key issues, often by avoiding opposing arguments rather than addressing them. So you try to change the course of the argument by throwing it kind of off kilter into another area that it's not related and it doesn't make sense. The level of mercury in seafood may be unsafe, but what will fishers do to support their families? Okay, well, we're talking about one thing, the level of mercury in seafood, but now this person has jumped it over to fishermen supporting their families. That's also ad misericordiam. Do you remember? That's an appeal. That's like a pathos. That's an appeal to emotion. So in this example, the author switches the discussion away from the safety of the food and talks instead about an economic issue, the livelihood of those catching fish. While one issue may affect the other, it doesn't mean that we should ignore possible safety issues because of possible economic consequences to a few individuals. Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't, but you need to stick to whatever's being talked about when you're in an argument. Don't pull a red herring, and be on the lookout for red herrings. A straw man, it's an oversimplification of the opponent's viewpoint. You oversimplify what they're saying, and then you attack that hollow argument that basically you just created that the other person didn't say at all. People who don't support the proposed state minimum wage increase hate the poor. Okay, that's a little extreme. In this example, the author attributes the worst possible motive to an opponent's position. In reality, however, the opposition probably has more complex and sympathetic arguments to support their point. By not addressing those arguments, the author is not treating the opposition with respect or even refuting their position. Ad misericordiam, that's the appeal to emotion. It's more an appeal to pity. It's like a sadness thing. A fallacy in which someone tries to win support for an argument by exploiting his or her opponent's feelings of pity or guilt. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you should not find the defendant guilty of murder, since it would break his poor mother's heart to see him sent to jail. Okay? Trial lawyer, rather than arguing for his client's innocence, tries to move the jury to sympathy for him. But his argument is irrelevant to the real issue at hand, whether he's guilty of the crime committed. Is this the last one? Yep, poisoning the well, last one. An appeal to hate. This is when you try to turn somebody against someone else. presenting negative information about an opponent to preemptively, ahead of time, discredit what he or she says. So you're trying to make your opponent look bad before they've even had a chance to speak. Example, Tim says, "Boss, you heard my side of the story, why I think Bill should be fired and not me. Now I'm sure Bill is going to come to you with some pathetic attempt to weasel out of this lie that he has created." That's poisoning the well. That's trying to turn the boss against Bill before Bill has had a chance to speak. Tim, in an effort to make himself look good and come out ahead, says bad things about his coworker Bill before Bill has had a chance to state his side of things. Tim's goal is to turn his boss against Bill before Bill makes his own argument. Tim has poisoned the well. And that is your study guide. So if you have any questions, let me know. Please make sure you're good with all of this stuff, and definitely the vocabulary. All righty, people. Thank you very much, and I will talk to you later.